Lightning didn't just split the sky that night. It ripped reality apart like the gods were having a full-on meltdown. In the cursed tower of Shadowmere Fortress, perched on cliffs so red they looked like they were bleeding, a 14-year-old girl was literally screaming her way through hell. Her name was Aria Nightshade, and tonight she was giving birth to something that would either save the kingdom or burn it to ashes. The healers were freaking out. Their hands shook as they worked because everyone in that room knew the brutal truth. This kid was way too young to survive this. But the baby inside her, that thing was radiating magic so powerful it was cracking the protective rune stones and turning candle flames purple. This wasn't just a difficult birth. This was a prophecy being born in blood. Outside, the storm raged like the world was ending. Thunder crashed against the fortress walls with dragon fury, while rain hammered down like the sky wanted to drown everyone. But inside that tower, lit by flickering candles and glowing amber runes, Aria was fighting the battle of her life. Her screams weren't just pain, they were destiny refusing to stay quiet. The head healer, ancient Morna, who'd seen everything in 3 generations of noble births, shook her head gravely. This girl was too small. The baby was too powerful. Nothing about this was normal. The magical energy coming from Aria's womb was off the charts, making even experienced battle mages nervous. The old prophecies talked about children like this, born in storms and blood, marked by gods, destined to reshape kingdoms. And here it was, happening right now, whether anyone was ready or not. Aria's tiny hands gripped blood-soaked sheets so hard her knuckles turned ghost white. Sweat and tears mixed on her face. Her body felt like it was being torn in half by invisible hands. She was just a kid, for crying out loud. 2 years ago, she'd been playing with dolls. Last year, she'd been learning embroidery and dreaming about fairy tale princes. Now she was dying in a pool of her own blood, bringing a child into a world that had shown her nothing but cruelty. The pain hit a level that made death seem like mercy. Her screams turned hoarse and broken as the healers chanted ancient words, their hands glowing golden as they channeled healing magic into her failing body. The storm responded. Lightning struck so close the entire tower shook, and stone dust rained from the ceiling. Everyone thought both mother and child were goners, and then a sound that changed everything. A cry, sharp, defiant, absolutely refusing to die. The baby's first breath echoed through the chamber like a war horn. The healers gasped and stepped back in shock. The child was a boy, small but fierce, lungs powerful despite his size. But his eyes, oh God, his eyes, they glowed like molten gold, burning with inner fire no newborn should possess. Ancient runes appeared on his tiny skin, swirling patterns of light pulsing with his heartbeat before fading into invisibility. Morna's hands shook as she wrapped the child in blessed cloth. "The prophecy," she whispered. "Sweet gods, the prophecy is real." This child, born from a 14-year-old's nightmare in the heart of a storm, carried power that would make kings tremble. And here he was, crying in the arms of a mother who was herself still just a child. Aria lay motionless, her breathing shallow, skin pale as death. Blood pooled beneath her, more than anyone should lose and survive. The healers rushed back, channeling every ounce of magic they had, pouring potions down her throat, wrapping her in enchanted bandages that glowed with restorative power. For hours she drifted in that gray space between life and death. This is the story of Aria Nightshade, the girl they tried to erase, the mother who bent fate itself, and the woman who literally changed a kingdom's destiny. Buckle up, because this story hits different. The year was 1443, and the kingdom of Ethermore was basically a complete dumpster fire. For 3 generations, 2 power-hungry houses had been tearing each other apart. On one side stood House Starfall, silver-tongued politicians who claimed divine right to rule. Their motto was "Light conquers all." Yeah, right. Until you realized they'd burned half the countryside enforcing their divine justice. On the other side lurked House Shadowfang, brutal warriors wielding dark magic. Their philosophy was savage, Power isn't given, it's taken. Their motto, strength alone survives. They ruled with an iron fist, and people who opposed them disappeared. The common folk were just caught in the crossfire, tired of watching their villages burn while nobles played their sick games. Kids grew up never knowing peace, learning to recognize which army was coming by the sound of hoofbeats. Into this nightmare, baby Aria opened her eyes. Born to House Nightshade, a lesser noble family sworn to Starfall, she should have had a comfortable life. Her father, Lord Damien Nightshade, was a legendary battle mage who could summon storms and turn battles single-handedly. The king himself honored him repeatedly. But here's the brutal truth about being too powerful. It makes people nervous. When Aria was just 2 years old, her world exploded. Lord Damien was accused of treason, secretly meeting with Shadowfang agents, selling military secrets, plotting to overthrow the king. The trial lasted 1 day. Verdict: guilty, sentence, death. They executed him at dawn in the capital square, public and brutal. His blood stained the execution platform, and his head was displayed on a spike for 3 days. Little Aria was too young to understand why Papa never came home. But somewhere deep in her mind, a lesson burned itself in. In this world, yesterday's hero becomes tomorrow's corpse. Trust is a luxury. Power is the only currency that matters. Lady Isidora, Aria's mother, was sharp as a blade and twice as dangerous when cornered. She'd watched her husband's execution, but she wasn't about to let her daughter follow him to an early grave. Isidora understood clearly. Survival meant strategic marriage alliances. Love was a fairy tale for fools. So when Aria was just 7 years old, her betrothal was arranged. The groom was Lord Valen Thornheart, 12-year-old son of Duke Thornheart, one of the most powerful nobles in Starfall. On paper, this was perfect. The betrothal ceremony was beautiful, young Aria in silver and blue, little Valen trying to be brave. Aria liked the pretty dress and sweet cakes, and Valen seemed nice, sharing his candies when adults weren't watching. But fate is a prankster with a twisted sense of humor. When Aria was 11, everything went sideways. Duke Thornheart was caught red-handed in a conspiracy to assassinate the king. This wasn't minor. It was a full-blown coup attempt. Turns out the Duke had been playing both sides, making backroom deals with Shadowfang agents. The plot was only discovered when a conspirator got cold feet and ratted everyone out. The scandal was massive. The king's justice was swift and brutal. Duke Thornheart was arrested, dragged from his bed in chains. They tortured him for 3 days in the palace dungeons. When they were done, they hanged him from the city gates and left his body there for a week as a warning. His son, young Valen, became an orphan overnight, stripped of everything. The Thornheart name was erased from nobility. Valen vanished into obscurity. Some said he joined a monastery, others claimed he died of grief. Nobody knew for sure. Aria's betrothal was instantly voided. For the 11-year-old, this was lesson number 2. Alliances are written in water. Today's promise becomes tomorrow's joke. In politics, nobody is safe ever. Once again, Lady Isidora went back to work, calculating risks, finding new paths. The kingdom was shifting dangerously. King Aldrich was old, paranoid, and failing. Shadowfang was getting bolder. Into this chaos came whispers of a rising star, Commander Kael Wolfsbane, an absolute beast on the battlefield. Orphaned as a kid, raised by warrior monks, by 25 he'd won impossible victories against Shadowfang forces. Lady Isidora saw opportunity. Here was a man hungry for legitimacy. If he married into a noble house, he'd gain respectability. In return, Aria would gain protection from one of the most dangerous men in the kingdom. The proposal came. The year was 1459. Aria was 12 years old. When her mother told her she'd marry Commander Kael Wolfsbane, Aria felt sick. She'd seen Kael at court, tall, scarred, with cold eyes. He was more than twice her age. She wanted to scream, to run, to beg for another way. But begging changed nothing. The wedding day arrived with elaborate pageantry. The hall was decorated magnificently. Aria wore an expensive dress, looking like a little bride playing dress-up. But this was real, and every step felt like walking toward execution. Kale stood at the altar in military uniform, medals gleaming. To guests, he looked like a perfect hero, but Aria saw cold calculation in his eyes. The ceremony proceeded, vows spoken, magical bindings cast. Everyone cheered. When festivities ended, Aria faced the reality that would scar her forever. The bridal chamber was decorated romantically, all a lie wrapping something brutal. That night, Kale showed his true nature. He had zero interest in waiting, zero care that his bride was a child. In his mind, she was property. What happened Aria never spoke about. The trauma lived in her body forever, in how she flinched at sudden movements, in nightmares, in never trusting men again. Healers were summoned before dawn. The damage was severe. Aria was bleeding heavily, in shock. They worked all morning using every spell, trying to repair what brutality had destroyed. For weeks Aria drifted in fever. When she finally recovered enough to walk, she was different. The girl who believed in fairy tales was dead. In her place was someone harder who understood survival meant enduring. Kale showed no guilt. He visited once, asked when she'd be ready for wifely duties again. No apology, nothing but cold pragmatism. 2 months later, healers discovered Lady Aria was pregnant. At 12, still recovering from trauma, carrying a child. When they told her, she felt her world collapse again. She cried for days, locked in her chamber, praying to gods she wasn't sure existed. As her belly grew, so did whispers. The magical energy from her womb was off the charts. The baby was unnaturally strong. Ancient texts spoke of children born with great destiny. Lady Isidora ordered healers to keep quiet. Aria felt the power inside her, felt her son's magic responding to her emotions. They were connected deeper than physical. Months crawled by. Healers monitored constantly, discussing slim survival chances. Aria understood she probably wouldn't survive. Part of her almost welcomed death, an end to pain. But another part wanted desperately to live, to see this child, to prove she was stronger than the men who destroyed her. The birth came early, on that storm night. We've come full circle to where this story began. That tower room where Aria fought for her life and brought Thuron into the world. For weeks after, Aria hovered between life and death. Healers said she'd never bear another child. Her body was permanently broken, but her spirit was transforming. As she recovered, she looked at tiny Thuron and made a vow. No matter what I must endure, I will see my son claim his destiny. He will rise, and I will make it happen. That vow sustained her through years ahead. As Thuron grew, political chaos consumed Ethermore. King Aldrich died when Thuron was 3, succession crisis erupted. Starfall fractured. Shadowfang seized territory. Kale was often away on desperate campaigns. While he was gone, Aria learned. She studied maps, cultivated relationships with servants who brought gossip, read everything about history and politics, built a network of allies. Quietly, carefully, always appearing dutiful while becoming a master of intrigue. When Thuron was 5, Shadowfang assassins infiltrated the castle, sent to kill Kale. But Kale was away. They found Aria and Thuron instead. Aria threw herself between them and her son. But Thuron's magic, triggered by danger, exploded outward in raw power that vaporized 2 assassins. The others fled in terror. Word spread like wildfire. The Wolfsbane heir had awakened, his power off the charts. Suddenly Thuron was a weapon, a game changer. Both factions took interest. Some wanted to use him, others wanted him dead. Aria realized Shadowmere was no longer safe. She reached out to Lord Cassius Ravenmore, who controlled remote mountain territory and stayed neutral. She sent a message. I need sanctuary for my son. When he comes of age, you'll have loyalty of the most powerful mage of this generation. Ravenmore agreed. Under darkness, Aria smuggled Thuron out, disguised as refugees. 3 weeks of hard travel through war-torn territory. When they reached Ravenmore's mountain fortress, they'd made it. Thuron was safe. Kale was furious when he found out, but Arya stood her ground for the first time, sending back, "Your son is a target of assassins. I'm keeping him alive. When the realm is stable, we'll return." Kale couldn't argue. A living heir in hiding beat a dead heir in a castle. Thuron grew up in the mountains, trained by the best tutors. He learned magic from ancient texts his grandfather studied. He learned strategy from retired generals. Most importantly, he learned from his mother about patience, planning, understanding that real power comes from knowing when and how to use what you have. Years passed. By the time Thuron was 15, the kingdom was exhausted. Both Starfall and Shadowfang had fought to a standstill. The current Starfall king was weak and despised. The Shadowfang war chief was old, his sons fighting among themselves. Arya saw the moment approaching. The kingdom was crying out for someone who could end the madness. Her son. Thuron was ready, a master of battle magic, smart, educated. Arya began reaching out through her network to dissatisfied nobles, merchants, priests, commoners, all desperate for hope. She didn't present Thuron as Starfall or Shadowfang. She presented him as something new, a unifier, a child of prophecy destined to end violence and bring peace. The response was overwhelming. Within months, Thuron had a dedicated army. Lord Ravenmore declared for him. Other lords followed. War-weary generals quietly promised support. In spring of his 16th year, Thuron marched from the mountains. His banner showed neither silver star nor black wolf. It showed a golden eye surrounded by lightning, symbol of the prophecy. His army grew as he marched. The final battle happened at Broken Crown Field. King Cedric brought Starfall forces. Warlord Malachar led Shadowfang. Both intended to crush this upstart boy. Thuron met them both. The battle was brutal and short. Thuron's magic was overwhelming. Lightning shattering shield walls, storms scattering cavalry. But Arya's political maneuvering won the day. She'd sent secret messages to key commanders, offering places in the new kingdom, appealing to war weariness. When battle peaked, those commanders ordered troops to stand down. Units stopped fighting and knelt. King Cedric's army melted away. Warlord Malachar walked across the battlefield to Thuron. The old war chief looked into Thuron's eyes and nodded. "The gods have spoken," Malachar said. "I've fought 50 years, boy. I know when a war is over." He took off his helm, knelt, laid his sword at Thuron's feet. "I give you my oath. End this madness. Give us peace." King Cedric fled, but the capital closed its gates against him. The people had decided the old ways were done. Thuron entered the capital as a liberator. People lined streets, cheering, crying, praying. Within a week, Thuron was crowned king of Ethermore. He took the name Thuron the Unifier. His first act was officially ending the civil war and offering amnesty to anyone willing to accept the new order. Throughout all this, Arya stood by her son's side. Now 28, bearing scars of her traumatic youth but radiating quiet power, she became Queen Mother with immense influence. Every major decision passed through her council. While Thuron was the shining hero of prophecy, everyone knew the truth. Behind the throne stood a woman who'd turned suffering into strength, who'd spent 16 years planning this exact moment. Arya's revenge against the world that broke her was complete. But it wasn't revenge of destruction. It was revenge of transformation. She'd taken a system designed to crush girls like her and bent it to her will. She turned her son into a king through patience, intelligence, and refusing to give up. The years that followed brought healing. Thuron proved a wise ruler, rebuilding infrastructure, reforming laws, ending cycles of revenge. Arya founded schools where all children could learn. She established laws protecting women and children, making forced marriages illegal, setting minimum ages for betrothals. She couldn't change what happened to her, but she'd make sure the next generation didn't suffer the same way. Chaol had died during the final campaigns 3 years before Thuron's rise. When Arya heard, she felt nothing. Not joy, not sorrow, just hollow acknowledgement that the man who'd brutalized her was gone. Lady Isadora lived to see her daughter's triumph. dying peacefully at 72 knowing her desperate calculations had worked. Her final words, "You were always stronger than you knew, child. Look what you built from the ruins." Aria lived to 45. Her health never fully recovered. In her final days, surrounded by grandchildren, Thuron had married a kind woman who actually loved him. She reflected on her impossible journey. "I was just a scared little girl," she told Thuron. "I should have died a dozen times, but we didn't fail. You know why? Because I refused. They tried to break me, make me nothing, but I refused to be nothing. That's the real magic, refusing to accept the world's verdict on who you're allowed to be." She died the next morning peacefully, Thuron holding her hand. The entire kingdom mourned. They buried her in the royal crypts, her tomb marked, "Aria Nightshade, Mother, Survivor, Architect of Peace." That's how the story ended or began, depending how you look at it. Because Aria's true legacy wasn't just King Thuron or the dynasty he founded. It was the idea she proved through her impossible life, that the most powerless person could, through intelligence and determination, and refusing to quit, change everything. Her story became legend told to children for generations. The core truth remained. A 14-year-old girl, broken and bleeding in a storm, had looked at her newborn son and decided they both deserved better. And then she'd spent her whole life making that decision reality, brick by brick, scheme by scheme, year by year. She'd turned suffering into strategy, pain into power, and desperation into destiny. That's the story of Aria Nightshade, the child bride who became the most dangerous player in the Game of Thrones, the mother whose love reshaped a kingdom. And if there's one lesson echoing across ages, it's this: never underestimate someone who has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for, because those are the people who change the world.